Next up, very fascinating one here. We've got Fresno State and Kansas. Kansas Jayhawks, 13-point home favorites here. Total 50.5. Very important to note that Kansas is back in their natural home stadium this year, the brand new stadium, the David Booth Kansas Memorial Stadium, which is all ready to rock here for week 0. So you do have to factor that in. Should be a great atmosphere. It's a Saturday night game. You're opening a brand new stadium for Kansas Jayhawks football. That's going to mean that's a little bit of a situational and tangible extra little advantage probably for Kansas going into this game. That being said, we are asking this team to lay double digits, and this has not always been their best point spread role, the last couple of seasons when you look at it. They have not been exactly reliable laying chalk, laying points. And last year, they had that awful, dismal start to the season. Now, they did get red hot down the stretch. They played better. Jalen Daniels, their quarterback, who struggled early in the season, he played better. He's back once again. Feels like he's been here for a very long time, Jalen Daniels, but he's back. They certainly finished the season strong last year. They went 5-1 against the spread, 4-2 straight up down the stretch, including, wins against Iowa State, BYU, Colorado. There were some good wins for Kansas down the stretch in Big 12 play. But let's not forget they didn't finish the season. They didn't start the season well. They lost outright as favorites to Illinois. They lost outright as favorites at home to UNLV. They lost pick'em games against TCU and West Virginia. They lose to Arizona State last year. Remember, the West Virginia loss. West Virginia did not have a very good season. So all things considered, it was not a good start for Kansas last year. Now, when you look at the Jayhawks this year, there's reason for I like Lance Leipold, no doubt about that. I trust them to have probably a little bit of a step forward this year as well. But there are still question marks. There are still holes. Let's not forget that this was a defense that couldn't stop anything most of the season, especially early on. How much of an improvement is that unit going to make this year? I'd like to see that before I'm ready to lay 13 in a spot like this, the first game of the season, knowing that how much of the struggles that side of the football had last year for the Jayhawks. And it was bad. Like, they were getting ripped and they were getting carved up and they were, giving up big plays. It's a reason why this year, they're bringing in, obviously, they made some changes. Obviously, a guy like Lance Leipold's not going to be happy with what he saw defensively. So in comes DK McDonald now as the new DC. And in fact, he's got a couple of new OCs as well, and Jim Zabrowski and Matt Lubbock. So it'll be interesting to see now with the new coordinators, both sides of the ball, how it's going to fare. But when you look, obviously, at last year's defense, just wasn't really that great. 79th, over 28 points per game allowed. Not really what you want to see, no question about that. The defensive line actually looks like it could be in steady shape. But again, you're bringing in a lot of new talent. They went really transfer portal heavy on the defensive side of the football. This Kansas State team, only 5 starters back. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out for them this year. Like I said, on the offensive side of the football last year, Daniel struggled early, but he really got it going down the stretch. Can he keep that going throughout the season? The offensive line should be very good. I will say that. Kansas does look like they bring back a pretty solid offensive line entering this season. And again, Daniel's healthy. They really like Daniel Hishaw, the running back. He should be solid. Emmanuel Henderson leading them at receiver. No question about that. But again, it'll be interesting to see how they fare with the receiving core, because outside of that, there's some depth concerns for Kansas. Then you flip it around to Fresno State, and brand new head coach, Matt Entz, who is a pretty well-renowned coach, did some great things at the FCS level, was formerly a head coach of North Dakota State, which has been a FCS powerhouse, for the last several years. Most recently, linebacker coach under Lincoln Riley at USC. And now he comes over here to be head coach for Fresno State. One thing to point out with Fresno State, and there is going to be a little bit of a philosophy change, if you will, for this Fresno State team coming into this season. And it's going to be a little bit of a shift from what we saw. And it's going to be on the offensive side where we've seen a little bit more pace and a little bit more of a pass-heavy approach. Not this year. This is going to be slow it down, really, really slow it down, and really run the football a lot. Not just a little bit, a lot is what we're expected to see out of Fresno State this year. They're going to be, and I already read things that they plan on playing mostly CMAC, 12 personnel, 13 personnel. And what that means is multiple tight ends to help block for the run game. So when you look at that kind of a formation, it tells you they're just going to go old school power football, which is a very interesting approach offensively when you bring in a guy like E.J. Warner, who is going to be their new starting quarterback. Of course, we've seen E.J. Warner now a bunch, Temple, Rice. He's played in both places in the past, and now he is going to take over as the starting quarterback here for Fresno State. And yes, he has the pedigree of his dad, Kurt Warner, no question about that, but we haven't seen the progression. We haven't seen the improvement. We have not seen E.J. Warner take that big leap in really any of his college football seasons. Like, this guy for his career isn't completing 60% of his passes. Keep that in mind. So, like I said, when you look at it, you would think, well, you brought in a guy, E.J. Warner, that was highly recruited, and yet you're going to run the football a ton. Does that really make sense? It actually does make sense, because I have yet to see, Connor, and you can tell me if you agree or not, I have yet to see E.J. Warner play great, as a college football quarterback. So if you can put a good run game around him, a solid offensive line around him for this Fresno State team, and then put him in a spot where he's not asked to do a lot, he can be a complement to the run game, which I think is going to be Matt Entz's, approach here. We're going to try to support. It's not E.J. Warner's going to support us. We're going to support E.J. Warner with this offense. We're going to put the tools around him to make life a little easier on him. So they definitely plan on running the football quite a bit this year, Fresno State, in this new offense, and saying, you know what, play action. When the defense now is focusing a lot on the run, then it opens up for some things down the field, and that's where Warner can make some plays. But they are definitely going to try to take something off his plate and run this football quite a bit this year. And they certainly have a very solid ground game to do that, led by, and they've got two good ones, Elijah Gilliam and Bryson Donaldson. These are two pretty solid running backs that Fresno State has this year. They both, last year, he averaged almost 500 yards for the season, over 6 yards per carry. Really good stuff coming into this season, no question about that. And yeah, there's only two starters on the O-line, and it's a lot of new faces at receiver, but they're going to run the football a lot. So if you're going to be a little weaker, the receiving core is not a bad place to be weaker when you're going to run the football a lot. And even though they got two offensive line starters back, I always say that you can survive less experience on the O-line if you're going to run the football a lot, because it's easier to run block than pass protect. Anybody that watches football knows that. That's why they say all the time on a broadcast, when the offensive line is struggling, run the football. Let them get off their blocks, because it's just easier for these guys to run block than it is pass protect. So even with just two starters back on the O-line, I don't think that's going to be an insurmountable problem for Fresno State entering this season. So it'll be interesting to see how this run-heavy, slow-paced offense goes for Fresno this year. And the one thing, too, you have to remember about Kansas is how at times last year, CMAC, the run defense was leaky, was spotty. Now, they say they like the D-line. It's trending in the right direction for Lance Leipold and company this year. They think it's going to be eventually in a position to be better, but you are still talking about, new personnel on that side of the football. How quickly, is that run game going to improve? That's going to end up being the big question, because you look at it, they gave up over 160 rushing yards per game. That put them at 80th last year in college football defensively against the run, Kansas. And you got a team that's going to run the football quite a bit. So the way I see it, Fresno could have success here running the football with their two backs. Kansas struggled against the run last year. And you know what you're going to get out of Fresno. They want fewer possessions, shorten the game, limit possessions, move the chains, keep Kansas offense off the field. And if they have success running the ball and just gradually moving those chains, it suddenly, Connor, becomes a lot to ask Kansas to lay 13. I'm I'm pretty sure Fresno State's going to be on my card. I like Fresno State in this spot. I don't like Kansas's long-term track record as favorites, especially bigger favorites. And I like Leipold, and he's done a great job with this program until really the only bump in the road was the way they played first half of last year. Other than that, he's done a really nice job here. But I am just not comfortable laying 13 here. I get it. It's home opener. They're excited for the brand new stadium opening, the first game there. I get it. But I'm not comfortable still laying 13 with Kansas. I fully expect to be on Fresno State plus the points in some form. CMAC, what do you think here? Interesting game. Mountain West versus Big 12. Fresno State, Kansas.
Yeah, the lone factor here is a little bit this is an opening game here. Didn't have, a home field. Now they're back. It's all renovated. So the place will be pumped. That was like, this is the lone thing. Because for me, this is Fresno. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to be on them here in this game. Because I think they could keep it close. One thing, which I think they bring back, their defense was pretty good, last year. Of course, the offense wasn't great. They had some slip-ups in some games. So, and everything that I'm looking at, I think their defense will be all right. And there's just too many question marks. You touched on Kansas here.
He has
their defense
background too, Matt Entz, the head coach. So So I think even though there's some questions about experience and all that, he's a great defensive-minded coach. They could probably craft a good defense regardless, in my opinion. Yeah.
And Kansas, their defense, there's a lot of talk. It's going to be better, play better down the stretch. They still gave up a ton of points. This team just hasn't been good as a favorite too. They haven't. So just to touch on that, Fresno hasn't been good as a dog on the road. There's a lot of things preaching that they haven't been great opening games on the road. There's, I'm sure you guys can rip through, look at all these stats ups, but it's kind of conflicting. Bad team not covering, Fresno a little bit trouble, but I think the number's just too big. I think they'll be able to run the ball in this game. Warner, both these quarterbacks though. Let's just do both here. I have question marks with Daniels. I mean, it's just the injuries, and he played so well. Whatever, 3 years ago. I think he had 14 touchdowns, 12 picks last year. So can he stay healthy? We will see. So I think their offense will be all right. I just think this game is 10 points or less, unless there's just some Warner has some big issues. And Daniels, the turnovers were a problem, and that's what they were so bad at last year. They were so fucking bad, Kansas, in the second half of football games. Yep. It was pretty sickening. Now they ended the year a lot better. But I mean, they started out 1-6 or whatever, before they won whatever it was, the 3 out of the last 4. So yeah, I think I don't have a lot of trust in Warner, but I think their defense is good enough here. I think, like you talked about, they're gonna run the football, and I think they can keep this close. I was hoping this would be just another week other than week 1, where it'd be like a real slam dunk. But I think their defense is good enough to hang in this football game, and hopefully their offense can run it and move it enough with Warner not making enough big mistakes against this Kansas team they're talking there a lot, the defense, but I don't really see it from everything. I think it's just a all right defense that's going to give it up a little bit. So yeah, I totally agree. This total, what do we get? The slow down. That's what Fresno wants to do. But Kansas played a lot more overs last, and I don't know if their defense is great. What do you think of this total? You like the over here? The 50.5? It wasn't enough for me to bet. I've been looking at it just a little bit, last couple of days.
Fresno's not a team I'm excited to bet the over with
exactly.
what they're going to do.
I'd rather just have them in the game.
Feed clock. They want to take the air out of the football, limit possessions, and that's the way he was at North Dakota State as a head coach, and that's the way the new offensive coordinator was too. He comes over from South Dakota in the FCS, the new OC for Fresno State, and he also was a run-heavy, slower-paced offense that he implemented there at South Dakota. Josh Davis, the new offensive coordinator. Not to mention the new defensive coordinator for Fresno, Nick Benedetto, has some good pedigree behind him. Northern Illinois, who's always had, at least at times, a little bit of a better defense in that conference. For a conference that isn't always known for amazing defenses, Northern Illinois has had some pretty good defenses in that conference, and Nick Benedetto was there looking over that. So It definitely feels like defensive-minded coaching staff, run-heavy offensive approach. That's a combination that doesn't make me think over. Let me put it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I was like. I think there could be enough sloppiness where it could, but from everything, I want the dog here is to keep this game a little bit more low scoring. You know, I'd rather have the points with them than kind of mess with the total, even though it could get there. And we'll see with Warner here on the road, but maybe he can kind of wiggle around running enough and a good game plan so he's not, you know, slinging it everywhere and running for his life. That was a problem too. You know, playing at Temple, I mean, the guys get sacked everywhere, and they're just a horrible football team. So yeah, I'm pumped about this game. You know, when I was you know, breaking it down the last couple of days, looking at it.
Yeah, this is probably one of the next intriguing matchups on the Saturday slate for Week 0, no doubt.